even have any notes. I'm going to take you to the Kate Smith Show. We were on the Kate Smith Show 2 years, 1950, 51, 52. And I had just finished 6 years for ABC, and it was I was so lucky. I tell you, your career depends so much on things you have no control over. Timing and luck. I've been extremely lucky, and the timing is just, you have no control. Of course, it's like every job, you can't get a job unless you've got experience. You got to get experience unless you got a job. It's that sort of thing. And it was marvelous. She was wonderful. There was never any tension on the show. She was a very big woman. You know that she was insulted so much by Bert Lahr. She was discovered in 1925, I think, during the Follies of some kind. And Bert Lahr was supposed to be the star of the show, The Cowardly Lion. And she came on, she did the Charleston. She weighed 350 pounds, and she was the hit of the season. Everybody came to see Kate Smith. And he would stand behind the curtains, and as she went on, he would talk about something. Here's the little elephant doing her dance again. So she never forgot it, never heard her all the rest of her life. But she was lovely on the show. We had 2 years. I never saw any trouble whatsoever. The show ran very smooth, except for a few things. Ted Collins, he had gone backstage, and he said, well, I'll make a star out of you, and if you agree, give me 50%, and she agreed, and they never had a written contract. He was another kettle of fish. It's a fanny patter for one thing. You hid behind the curtains when you saw him coming. But Ted had I think I'll tell you about Charles Lawton. And I'll tell you, first of all, it was at the Ice Center. Were you ever in New York when they had the Ice Center? It was as big as it was a skating rink. It wasn't just a stage, it was skating. It was huge, and you couldn't see the audience as you were doing your show. It was just black out there, and the big spotlights were on you, and you do your show, and then the first time we did it, went right, we remembered our lines, and the spotlights went out, the stage lights. Now there were 50 or 60, I can't remember, it was 60 or 80,000, terrible amount of people out there, and they all came to light here, and the roar of that applause. Alan took my hand, and he was just shaking, and Kate was motionless to stand up. Both of us walked over. It was like a 20th century limited train coming at you. And I mumbled to the stagehand, I said, what would have happened if we'd forgotten our lines? He said, oh, I don't know. So I asked him later, I said, what would happen? He said, we can't put a mic out there. The sound would pick up the prompter. And so ever after that, I always had the script in the desk on the stage. Because I thought, what do you do? What do you do if nobody's giving you a cue? But we never did. In all our next 20, 30, 40 years, never had to need a prompter. But I put his lines in the paper anyhow. So Albert always had a newspaper when I put his line. He needed glasses at that time, and I didn't. He was 17 years older than I was. He looked younger, and I looked older. It's about the size of him. But this time that I'm going to tell you now about the time Charles Lawton was on the show. We liked Victor Borge, right? Victor Borge. Mm-hmm. We liked him personally. He was nice, but he drove everybody crazy because he said that he didn't want to do the dress rehearsal because it took up the orchestra would laugh, and then they wouldn't laugh as loud when it came to do the show. So he did not do a dress rehearsal, and of course he milked it when he got on the stage. He was funny, twice as funny, and so. But somebody always got left off the program at the end of it. But this particular day, Charles Lawton was on doing the scene, play within a play, in the first act, or whatever act is in. I come back to Charles Lawton. Just let me say something. This really had nothing to do with. But I was Puck in junior year, and didn't we know anything about Midsummer Night's Dream? The teacher read it to us. We didn't know Shakespeare, and as we walked out, Red Hollenbeck. I went to prom with him. His dad later took out President Johnson's gallbladder. And they're all doctors, all doctors. So, and Red said to me, "Do you mean we're all fairies in this thing?" And I said, "I guess so." And well, we had sort of grown accustomed a little out of the tooth fairy that was stealing all our teeth and putting money in it. We didn't know what the hell a real fairy did. So we did the play, and it was terrible because we didn't know anything about Shakespeare. And I was Puck, and I didn't know what I was doing. And we were in street clothes, so you couldn't dance around and be silly. And the teacher came to me. The music was starting, and she came right behind the curtains. And I was standing there. I was supposed to leap down 3 grassy banks, and then come to the front, and with big smiles, welcome them all to having a hell of a good time. But she's standing there now, and the music is playing, so on. And she says to me, "You've got to get out there and do something. You are perfectly terrible. I'm sorry I ever cast you. You are just terrible. I'm just so sorry. Now you get out there and do something." And the curtain opened, tears coming down my face. And I leaped down these 3 grassy banks and went through the speech, and Miss Church was doing the music, and she goes like this. It was the only thing. And the play was nothing. We didn't do a thing with it. Well, the only thing is, it taught me one thing. I must have hired about at least 800 people in my life. Never had any trouble with anyone except one. And I learned one thing. You don't get anything out of it. At least I learned it. You don't get anything out of people when you yap at them. You just don't. And we didn't know what to do with the play at all. So I was familiar with the scene, however, that Lawton was playing. Didn't make much difference, but I was getting makeup on this day, 20 years later, and it was 51. And I'd seen the dress rehearsal, looked at it vaguely. I didn't care about the scene. I liked Lawton. And Ted Collins came in. It wasn't helped by the fact that we'd gotten very good notices when we appeared on the show. The show had started. And he didn't. So I came back. I was in the makeup room. She was putting on my makeup, and Ted Collins comes in. And he said, "You've got to make a cut. Can you cut 2 minutes out of your show?" I said, 2 minutes? No, 20 minutes to time we're going on the air. I said, "I can't cut 2 minutes out. How can I do that? I've got 3 things going here, 3 plots, and if I cut out this, it doesn't make any sense later." And he said, "Do something with Charles Lawton, with that Shakespeare thing." I said, "Do what?" He said, "Well, yeah, cut his script a little bit." I said, "Cut his... fiddle with Shakespeare in 15 minutes? I'd cut Shakespeare." That's what ass he was, really. So I said, "I can't do that." And I saw in my mirror, I could see Lawton standing in the doorway, and he's standing there kind of like this. And I said, "Well, what?" He said, "Just do something with this, do something with the script, do something with the Shakespeare thing." He said, and then he ran his pencil down the page and said, kind of have Shakespeare say, "And another thing." So that was a joke the rest of our lives. And another thing. And Lawton, he goes past Lawton's standing in the door, just looking at him, and he says, "We're making a cut. She's making a cut." And so I turned around after he left. I said, "Mr. Lawton, I'm not touching your script." And then I looked at him again, and I said, "Do you feel well?" He said, "I'm so sorry." And with a British accent, which I can't do. "So sorry, I should never have done this show. I just hate it. I just hate that. I hate doing television. I'll never do television again. It's my first show, and never." I said, "You feel all right?" He said, "I think I'm going to throw up." I think he said vomit. And I thought, oh, God. So I said, "Come on in." He saw my small toilet, and there's a sink here and a toilet here. And he said, "May I?" I said, "Yes." So he starts in, and I took his arm, and I said, "Oh, don't throw up in the sink. I got all my makeup on the side of it." And I said, "Sit in the John. Sit down." And I said, "Get down." So he got down on his knees, and then he looked up and said, "Lord, God, I haven't done this for so long." He said, "My mother always held my head." So said, oh. So I knelt down beside him, and I put one arm around his middle, wasn't quite as fat then, put the other on his forehead. And he threw up and threw, and I thought, this is unreal. I got the hunchback of Notre Dame. I got him right here throwing up in my toilet. You can't believe it. You know, Captain Bligh. He's gone all the way across the Pacific in a rowboat, and he's here throwing up. And then he said he was all right. He felt better. See, then I got a glass of water. I brought it over to him. I set it down. Now, wash your mouth out. I became his mother suddenly. I said, rinse your mouth out and put it in the dressing sink. And he stood up and I got a washcloth and I wiped his face off. And I brushed his hair. Wiped his he said, got a fresh shirt? And he said, no, I don't think so. Forget it. So silly. And he's looking like a little boy. And then I said, he said, I'm never going to do television again. I said, you'll do it fine. And I get up. I said, I'm going to forget my lines. I said, you're not going to forget your line. Say me thinks or forsooth or something. He said, they don't know the difference. There's thousands of people out there looking to see Charles Lawton. He said, thousands? He had to say I knew that was a mistake. I was like, how many there are, you know, but they're here to see you. Then he's still looking a little sick, and I said, do that look that you got, that funny look. What one is that? He said, when you're down back in Notre Dame and you're looking at Marina O'Hara and you like her and you got that awful makeup on and you do a little something cute with your nose and your chin. He said, I did? I said, yeah. He said, oh, I better go see the movie again. I said, well, it's 19th. He said, I don't remember what I did. I said, 1937. Did I? He said, yes. He said, I better do it. Then he looked at me and he said, and I walked him over to the door and he said, who are you going to be? I said, I'll stand in the wings. I'll be right there looking at you. He said, what are we going to do now? I said, well, I got to put some makeup on myself. And he said, well, I'll tell you, you watch my show, and then I'll watch yours. So I said, well, that's a favor. He sent me 3 dozen roses the next day. Wasn't it cute? It was so cute. What was the other one I was going to tell you about? Can't think. Was I going to do another one? Well, I suppose you want to hear the one about the naked guy that came to my door. Fan mail for about 3 years that I did the show. and never even thought about such a thing. For 7 years, I worked at different radio stations that have no interest to you, and how am I going to say? I did I did a woman's show half an hour in the morning. I did a monologue in it. I did Ethel and Albert in that show, and I wrote all the commercials, about 200 of them every week, and I got $15 a week and thought it was money wasted until I went on the air. And then, oh God, what was I going to tell you about the, oh shoot.
The nude.
The nude, you want the nude, I know you do.
That's all we care about, a nude.
All right, okay. Well, I'm saying that I've gotten up all my life at about 3:30 or 4 in the morning to write. Well, the phones don't ring. You know, you don't have any, the world is yours then. And I've done, I still do. And so when I would get up at my apartment in Gramercy Park, New York, and I go in the bathroom and take my shower bath, and I always got dressed, and because you have trouble your last lines, your tag lines, you get panicky and put anything, and so I thought I didn't want that last minute. I always thought, well, the end of my show first. So as a result, I got all done from the neck up. And I did my makeup on, maybe a hat. In those days you wore hats. And white gloves, never white shoes. But always you came uptown in New York with white gloves and a purse. And I put a house coat on over that, you see. So today I did the same thing. And I was looking out the window for an idea. I was frantic, it was 3:30. And I thought I heard some banging and banged, and I didn't pay much attention to it. It was a fall day, I think. And then I heard some more banging. And then I thought I heard something out in the hall. And I went to the living room. It was Gramercy Park. The house had been built for Kip Rhinelander and for his mulatto wife. And she had And she had been kicked out of society, and this was his house. And there were 5 apartments in the front and 5 in the back, long hall between there. And I got to the door, and I could hear something rustling, and then I heard like Miss Lynch? I said, is someone out there? And the boy said, yeah. Miss Lynch, oh, don't open the door, don't open the door, please don't open the door. I said, I'm not going to open the door, who is this? And he said, well, I'm a friend, just remember I'm a friend. I said, what is it, what do you want? And he said, oh, God, no, my wife's going to kill me. My wife is going to kill me. I know that. I'm from downstairs. I said, I listened again. I said, you don't sound like Dwight. No. He says, it's Dwight, I'm staying in his apartment. I got this long explanation. I'm staying in his apartment and to feed his cat and his fish. And I remember saying, cat and fish? It's a very weird combination. And he said, the fish are in the bedroom. And I said, well, but who are you? He said, well, I'm a friend of yours too. He said, don't open, what do you want? A coat? And I said, what's going on? And I said, is this Halloween or something? And I've missed it. I said, I'm not a friend of you. I don't have friends going around naked and pounding on doors. He said, well, what happened is I was going to put the garbage out, and then I saw New Yorker was out too far. I stepped that extra step and the door slammed shut. So I said, do you have nothing on? And he said, no. Well, the New Yorker. And I said, well, wait a minute, God. I was so nutty, I believe. I said, let me think. And I said, well, you want a coat? And he said, yes. And so I said, are you big or small? I'm small, he says. So I got in the coat. I grabbed out a coat, and I said, oh, here, my husband's wait. No, this isn't my husband's. This is Paul Bogart. He later directed All in the Family, Paul Bogart. I said, it's Paul's raincoat, and he left it there. I've got to return. Don't forget to I'll return it. I said, I'm not putting this out. I don't think I should do this. Oh, he said, don't call the police, too. Don't open the door and don't call the police and all that. And then he said, you'll know me. I said, how will I know you? I said, I pushed the coat out if I could see. Oh, he said, I was at he said, I played the trumpet. You're the trumpet player? And he said, yes. And I said, can I have a coat? And I said, I'll get the coat too, okay. And I had about 5 things, to take off the door. And then I said, push the coat off. I got to see your face. Do you have a ponytail? Yes. I'll take the rubber off. He said, never mind. And he says, I pushed the door open and I shoved the coat out like that. I said, walk down to the other end first. Walk down across the hall, about 15 feet. I want to look at your face. Just your face is all I want to look at. Said, I come from the Mayo Clinic. I've done every but operate. Now just look at it. Yes, I said, I know you. All right. So I opened the door. I said, put the coat out, and then I closed it a little bit. He looked so pathetic. I opened the door, and here he's standing, the coat's too big. He's standing there like this. I said, come on in. Wipe your feet. And I said, go and sit on the window seat. And so we went and sit on the window seat, and he's so sorry. So my wife is just going to kill me. I said, well, if she doesn't, I will. I've got a script to write. In here. I said, this is the second time that you have interfered with my writing. I know that. I'm terribly sorry. They had downstairs a jam session at 3 o'clock in the morning. Trumpet, saxophone, piano, God knows what else. And I was just furious, and I'd gone down, and I didn't call them, I thought to call the police. And I just bawled them out, and I remember he was a trumpet player. So I said, call the police. I said, I'll call the police. I laughed. I told them what happened. They laughed and said they'd be over as soon as the locksmith finished his wrestling match or something, and fight. He was watching television. So we sat there, two of us, and me in my bathroom, and I was making conversation. I said, well, Oh, he said he wrote for the New Yorker too. So you write for the New Yorker? Yeah. I said, do you like it? Yeah, I get so fed up, these cartoonists and the writers. God, you wait, they got deadlines, and you're sitting around waiting for them to hand in your manuscript so you're talking to a writer. Yeah, I know. I said, I don't think you realize it. I said, this is the second time that I'm due now. God, I said, look at the time, and I've got a script to do. I said, every night I sit here trying to think. I said, do you have any idea? Well, just listen to this. Say I've got a deadline now. Every night I have to go through this. I have a rating of 25. That means 1 point a minute. 25 million people are waiting to do a show to listen to a show or watch it or both in 2 weeks, and I haven't even got the written. It gives you quite a turn, doesn't it? 25 million people. Then I said, we do a repeat show at 6:45. That's another 12 million, Greater New York. So that's 37 million people might turn on their set in 2 weeks, and I've written a line. That's what I go through. He said, I'm sorry, I'm just so terribly sorry. So then what happened? Then he jumped. Oh, excuse me, he said, jumping up, grabbing everything. I said, what is it? I jumped up too. He said, I want to introduce myself. So we very formally shook hands. And we sat down again. And then I said, I can remember what I said next. And he finally said, oh, he jumped up again. I said, what's the matter now? He said, the garbage. I said, what about the garbage? He said, you said you wanted to set the garbage up, but I don't think I did. I said, well, so what? Well, he said, the police look at me long, and you said there was garbage down there isn't any garbage. I said, I don't think the police care. He said, I think we should have some garbage. I said, well, all right. So we go out to the kitchenette, across the living room. I said, come on with me. We go out there. I handed him a banana. I said, peel and give me the big peelings. And I got a sack and put banana peeling in it. That's 3 eggs. I broke those up and I put the yolks in the sack. And then I got some eggs and some bread and crumpled up something else. And got some garbage. So I said, take it downstairs now and put it by the door. They'll be here any minute. So he took it downstairs. And he put it by the car. And then I heard the police coming, and I looked out. They buzzed. And I buzzed them in, and then I closed the door and returned the coat tomorrow morning too. And went back and I started my typewriter again. I hadn't been there very long. And again there was a my doorbell. So I went over, and there were some 2 policemen there, and the fellow wasn't there. And he said, you want to do something? He said, next time you have somebody outside your door that is naked or dressed, call the police before you open the door. I said, yes, I know that, but he was sort of a friend. No, it doesn't matter, I don't care what he says. Don't open the door until the police arrive. We'll be there right away. And then he said, I said, well, I sleep, I have some protection. I sleep with a butcher knife under my next pillow. He said, don't you realize that the guy can use it much better than you can? He said, the thought had occurred to me. I said, and he said, where are you from? I said, Minnesota. And he went, oh. And all my life, whenever I've answered that, where are you from? Minnesota. They go, oh, what it means. I hated Fresno. I've never in my life, here or in Norway, heard, the other thing, go home. Never. So anyhow, and then just about that time, oh, I know what happened. Policeman said, but didn't you know, when you interrupted their concert, that we allowed them at that time, we don't do it anymore, probably because you fussed that night. We allowed them the one concert a year that all the windows are open in Gramercy Park. And he said, do you never heard of Eddie Condon? I said, no. You never heard of Miff Mole or Muggsy Spanier? I said, no. Eubie Blake? No, I hadn't heard of any. That's when he said, where are you from? And so then the second policeman stepped forward. He said, may I ask you a question, Miss Lynch? And I said, yes. And he said, it's nearly 4 o'clock in the morning, and you've got a bathrobe on, and he's not really dressed. He said, why are you wearing a hat? And he came up then with his coat, and I said, "Why didn't you tell me I was wearing a hat?" And he said, "I never noticed it." That was my experience. That was my job. That's enough, I think.